Hello, everyone, and welcome to This World, coming to you from New York City. The United States of America seems to be facing yet another political crisis as Speaker Kevin McCarthy is removed. And it's not very clear how any of this is going to fix the gridlock that we are seeing here. That's going to be one of the subjects we're going to be looking at. We're also going to turn our attention to renewed questions here about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, with somebody who was a few meters away from John F. Kennedy now coming out with a different sort of a statement. What implication does that have? And yes, there have been protests right here in New York City after an article written in the New York Times then led to the consequences in India with Newsclick and others. We turn our attention to that. So a lot coming up on this special episode of This World, coming to you from New York City. But let me start with politics and Kevin McCarthy and how a handful of Republicans played a role in getting him removed as a speaker. But now the big question that everyone here in the United States is asking, is this going to lead to further gridlock, to a further collapse of a political system that already seems to be so tied up in knots by so many political compulsions? So let's begin by diving into the political gridlock that seems to be taking place here in the United States. And frankly, there are Republicans, there are Democrats, and then there are extremists within the Republicans and to some extent within the Democrats. And all of this is leading to such a mess. It is leading to political positions that are becoming very difficult to transcend. It is becoming very difficult to get anything actually done out here because of those rigid political positions. And nothing underlined that more than the removal of Kevin McCarthy a little earlier this week. And then the question of how is this going to translate into political progress in the United States going forward from here?
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
A hunt is on in America. It's the hunt for the country's next speaker. Until the 3rd of October, Kevin McCarthy used to hold that seat. And then he didn't. The House of Representatives ousted him. Of its 435 members, 216 voted to remove the speaker. Never in the history of America has a speaker been voted out. Don't forget, the American speaker is not only in charge of the chamber, but also is the second in line to presidency. That's how prestigious the office is. Quick question. Kevin McCarthy is a Republican. So how did McCarthy manage to get voted out of a Republican-dominated House? A member of his own party rebelled against him. His name? Matt Gaetz. Gaetz has accused McCarthy of striking a secret side deal with Biden. Gaetz claims this deal was struck before the House passed a short-term spending bill to avoid a government shutdown. He got 8 rebel Republicans to join the Democrats into ousting McCarthy. If the Republicans voted out McCarthy because they felt betrayed, why did the Democrats join the rebel Republicans? Turns out they too felt betrayed by McCarthy, especially when the speaker did a U-turn. McCarthy first condemned Donald Trump for the storming of the Capitol and then backed him. The displeasure with McCarthy has been ongoing for a while, and now we know how the saga ends, at least for now. Time for the big questions. What did McCarthy's removal mean for the United States? 1. The US needs to find a speaker as soon as possible. 2. Until a speaker is sworn in, important issues will remain unaddressed in the House. This includes the issue of wartime aid to Ukraine. 3. A historical removal of the House Speaker also brings with it unprecedented embarrassment to the United States. 4. It is all the more embarrassing for the Republicans with its members breaking party ranks and slaughtering each other in public. Do voters need this kind of chaos in the run-up to the presidential elections? For now, Democrats can be heard having the last laugh, except, of course, Nancy Pelosi. She has been evicted from office space, one that is traditionally reserved for the former speaker. It's a position Kevin McCarthy now not so proudly holds.
Well, for more on that, let me now go to somebody who's a real insider on domestic politics here in the United States, quite literally, Brent Griffith, who works at The Insider. Brent, I'm glad the strike there at The Insider is now over, but Talk to us a little bit about what's happening with Kevin McCarthy, because for any observer from the outside, it's starting to look as if the democratic system here in the United States and the gridlock between the political parties, it's all not seeming very functional right now.
Well, thanks for having me. Absolutely. I think you could definitely question the functionality. The one caveat that I would add is that there are lots of Americans who voted for this sort of chaos and who sent people like Matt Gaetz to Washington to not really even accomplish a specific policy objective, but really to blow things up. And that's what's happened this week.
So if you look at the latest crisis, it appears that there were, what, 8 Republicans, all of them who seem to be linked in some way or the other to something called the Freedom Caucus. And they just took the decision that, yes, we should chuck out the Speaker of the House. And that has led to a fresh mess. Would that be a fair summary?
That is a fair summary. So the one key thing to understand is that for a long time within the House rules, Speaker Pelosi changed this a little bit, but there was the availability of any one member of either party to essentially remove the speaker. They could offer a motion that had to be considered, and then the House would vote on it. And so what you saw happen is exactly what you said. It's unprecedented. We've never had this moment in American politics.
You know, Brent, gridlock and dysfunction is bad at the best of times. But right now, there seems to be a recession coming. There are problems with the economy. There's a war taking place out there in Ukraine. So if this is the sort of distrust and inability to communicate across political lines that's happening right now, it's not very clear how parties or anyone are going to work together to solve those problems. How will they come together to tackle these issues?
When House Republicans took control narrowly last November, I think the expectation was that a lot of the things you had seen come out of Washington, be it on infrastructure, be it on climate change, that those were going to really stop, and that it was going to become basically the block and tackling of government, which is just the real things you have to do to, so keep the lights on. And so the most important thing right now is that in a little over 40 days, the federal government will run out of money again. And like you said, they have to agree, both parties, both the Democratic-led Senate and the White House, as well as House Republicans, on how to move forward with that. Otherwise, the troops might not be paid, national parks might not be open. There's a lot of potential bad things that can happen as a result of a shutdown.
Last question then, Brent. We're now soon going to enter the primary season, and then we're going to be heading for the elections. How do you see that process actually now rolling forward? Is it going to be Trump versus Biden? What do you see happening?
I think the path ahead here is to do the basic things, which, like I said before, that means that some of the larger term issues unfortunately get put to the back burner. That's become a really commonplace thing in American politics. But the most important thing is to keep the government funded in a little over 40 days. That will most likely happen. How it happens, I think that's anybody's best guess, because the reality is whoever succeeds Kevin McCarthy is going to be faced with the exact same scenario he faced just a few weeks ago. Beyond that, it seems that while a lot of American people would like to not have a rematch between President Biden and President Trump in 2024, for all intents and purposes, that's where we're headed right now. And who knows, what, as you said, what may become of that campaign.
Something else that's been capturing a lot of attention in the United States is once again that entire question over the John F. Kennedy assassination. Now, I know it took place nearly 60 years ago. I wasn't even born when that particular assassination happened. But the question marks around it have never, ever actually gone away. Was there another shooter? Was there a conspiracy? Well, someone who was not very far away from Kennedy when it actually happened has come out with his own statement, and that has led to renewed questions here in the US.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Who killed John F. Kennedy? The 35th United States President was assassinated in Dallas, Texas on the 22nd of November 1963. He was 46 years old and had been in office for 1,036 days. Former Marine Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for Kennedy's assassination on the same day. 2 days later, Oswald too was killed. United States agencies concluded that Oswald assassinated Kennedy and that he acted alone. In 1964, the Warren Commission drew the same conclusion. It's been 59 years, but not everyone is convinced. Over the years, several conspiracy theorists have spoken about a second shooter, that there was someone else that day firing bullets at Kennedy besides Oswald. Some claim it was the second shooter who fired the fatal shot. Here's what happened on the 22nd of November, 1963. John F. Kennedy was in Dallas on a political trip. In the afternoon, he was traveling in a presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas. He was seated on the passenger seat of the presidential limousine. On his left was First Lady Jackie Kennedy. On the seat in front were then Texas Governor John Connally Jr. and his wife. Around 12:30 p.m., shots were fired at Kennedy. The president's head split open. This is Paul Landis. Back in 1963, Landis was a 28-year-old Secret Service agent. His assignment was to protect the First Lady. On the ill-fated day, Landis was riding on the running board of a black Cadillac behind the presidential limousine. Landis is now 88 years old, and he is finally talking about what he saw that day. In his book, The Final Witness, Landis writes about a bullet he found on the presidential limousine. He said, and I quote, "It was a completely intact bullet. It had been hidden behind Mrs. Kennedy all the time she was seated. No wonder I had not seen it sooner. I picked it up and quickly examined it. It was approximately 2 inches long and in almost perfect condition. It was not distorted in any way and had rifle striations running lengthwise along the sides. Man, oh man, I thought, what should I do?" The Warren Commission report claims that Oswald fired 3 bullets that day. The first one missed Kennedy. The second one struck the president and also went on to wound Connally. The third bullet hit Kennedy's head. It was the fatal shot. The second bullet that has become debatable, the official version claims that the second bullet entered Kennedy near his nape and exited through his throat. The same bullet then went on to strike Governor Connally. The bullet struck his back, chest, wrist and thigh. And even after all of this, the bullet remained in pristine condition. Critics say this bullet, the magic bullet for its seemingly impossible trajectory and magically pristine condition, the Warren Commission claims this magic bullet was found on Connally's stretcher. Now Landis is contesting this. He writes, "The super bullet hadn't been on Governor Connally's stretcher in trauma room number 2. I recognized it as the bullet I had found in the limo and placed it next to President Kennedy's feet in trauma room number 1. Basically, Landis assumes the bullet he placed next to the president could have rolled onto Connally's stretcher, leading authorities to wrongly link it to the governor's injuries. If what Landis is claiming is correct, it means Connally was hit by a different bullet, meaning there were more than 3 bullets fired that day. But here's the thing, there were just 3 shells found on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository from where Oswald is believed to have fired the shots. Does that mean the remaining shots were fired by a second shooter from another location? Conspiracy theorists have been saying this for decades now. Some also believe that the bullet that hit Kennedy's head was never fired by Oswald. Why do they believe so? The Texas School Book Depository was in the rear of the limousine. But the video of the presidential motorcade, captured by a clothing manufacturer, Abraham Zapruder, in his Bell and Howell home movie camera, shows Kennedy moving backwards as a bullet hits his head. They claim the president's head movement is a clue that the bullet hit him from the front and that it was fired from someone taking a shot at John F. Kennedy from a grassy knoll in front and not the Texas Book Depository. Several books and eyewitness accounts have lent weight to this theory, questioning the official version. Paul Landis, who saw the assassination unfold in front of his own eyes, is the latest.
Well, for more on that, I'm now being joined by Glen Carl, former intelligence officer, linked to the CIA. Glen, you've been looking at these latest statements that are coming up, and obviously there's a lot of interest around the world. What do you make of the fresh developments?
I regret to say, or actually I think it's good that I say, is sort of much ado about not very much. The gentleman, the Secret Service officer who has come out with this new book or these new revelations now 60 years after the fact, he has actually stated publicly at the 20th anniversary of the assassination, and I think at the 50th also, they completely contradict what he wrote in his reports while serving as a Secret Service officer in the days following the assassination. I'm afraid that the facts don't substantiate what the gentleman has recently said.
Well, Glen, if you have to ask a lot of people, they still wonder about this. They still think there's a conspiracy. They wonder about the shooter on the grassy knoll. A lot of people have seen the Kevin Costner movie and JFK. So those questions around the assassination aren't going away.
You are correct, completely correct, that I think probably a majority of people, many of whom I admire, whom I know and admire greatly and respect, do subscribe or at least claim to be open to conspiracy theory. But we should remember people are inclined to find reasons behind all events, and in particular, terrible, traumatic ones like the assassination of President Kennedy, which we could all see on the Zapruder film, and which I and anyone of my generation remembers vividly. But our natural human inclination to find simple explanations often misleads us.
So, Glen, your opinion and the opinion of those whom you've interacted with in the intelligence community, there was no conspiracy and there was only one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yeah, yes, I think the simple answer is yes, that is correct. Also, we aren't any different than anyone else, except that some of us will have worked directly on some of these issues. And those people on the whole do accept the single shooter explanation and find really that the Warren Commission, with all recognition of the various flaws or imperfections that it had, fundamentally identified the right story also about the single shooter. Seemingly the Cubans knew in advance that Oswald was going to do this, but didn't inform the CIA for understandable reasons, because the CIA and the United States were trying to overthrow Castro. So yes, I think the short answer is my colleagues, experts, do subscribe to the mainstream explanation of the Warren Commission, single shooter, and don't accept the second shooter conspiracy.
All right, Glen, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And one final story that I'm going to leave you with from here in America is another article that was written in the Washington Post and some analysis about life expectancy in America. Now, you would think, look, it's clean air, nice surroundings, okay, healthcare is not the greatest and things like that, but life expectancy in America has actually stagnated and it seems to be falling, especially among the poor. Life expectancy is falling. What's the reason for that? It has led to some debate here in America. Is it poor diet? Is it unaffordable healthcare? What's the reason? Here's a look at that very tricky question.
What is the most basic fundamental rights? The right to life. But in the US, staying alive has become a challenge. We are not talking about gun terror alone. In general, people in the United States of America are reportedly dying prematurely. This has nothing to do with the Wuhan virus pandemic. This Washington Post report claims that life expectancy in the US had fallen even before the pandemic hit. In 2014, life expectancy in the US was 78.9. This was the highest ever. Ever since, the number has been on a decline. The question is why? Isn't the United States the world's most progressive country? Even the most advanced? One with supposedly the world's most advanced healthcare system. Quality of life, we are told, is the highest in the United States. So what is happening to those living in this very country? Why are they dying early? The Washington Post report points at chronic diseases. It claims that chronic illness is killing more people aged 35 to 64 than drugs or guns. It removes twice as many years of life than homicide, overdose, suicides, and accidents. But guess what? Premature death discriminates. The poor, the Post finds, are dying earlier than the rich. It mentions while breakthroughs in technology, medicine, and nutrition should be boosting average lifespans, it has instead been overwhelmed by poverty, racism, distrust of the medical system, fracturing of social network, and unhealthy diets built around highly processed food. In the early 1980s, poorer Americans were 9% more likely to die than the rich each year. The gap grew to 49% in 2000s and to 61% when COVID struck. Here's what's interesting. Even the wealthier communities in the US are dying younger compared to the people of the same age groups in Canada, France, and Japan. The Post claims that people living in a quarter of the US counties are dying at a higher rate than 40 years ago. That's when Jimmy Carter was president. Quick question. What chronic disease are Americans dying of? And why is America not addressing it? Because the factors contributing to these deaths are embedded in US culture and capitalism. For instance, the meals Americans eat are ultra-processed and supersized. Over 41% Americans today are obese. An average American man weighs 200 pounds. An average woman weighs around 171 pounds. This is roughly what men weighed in the 1960s. There is not only a rise in obesity, but also in liver disease, hypertension, kidney diseases, and diabetes. A lot of Americans are succumbing to cardiovascular diseases and cancers. In 2021, life expectancy in America was reported to be around 76.4 years, the lowest since the mid-90s.
And that's it on this episode of This World, coming to you from New York City in the United States of America. I'll be back in Delhi next week and will continue to bring you all the big stories as they are taking place around the world and the top experts to discuss them. But bye for now.